Hello everybody, my name is Novi and welcome back to the channel. By the year 2021, AEW's pillars had already been established in the company to a pretty high degree. MJF had been working main event caliber programs against the likes of Cody, Jon Moxley, and Chris Jericho. Sammy Guevara had long resided in the inner circle under the tutelage of Chris Jericho. Darby Allin had been TNT champion for 186 days on top of quickly becoming one of AEW's top babyfaces. And Jungle Boy was working with a newly debuted Christian Cage alongside tagging with Luchasaurus in what was one of AEW's most beloved tag teams of the era, Jurassic Express. These four young stars making names for themselves would go in different directions in the years to come, to put it lightly, but again, they each had a role within AEW they fulfilled at this point. The company itself was also in a talent acquisition whirlwind that year, with the likes of CM Punk, Bryan Danielson, Adam Cole, and many other top names making their debuts. However, in the midst of all of this, AEW was still keeping an eye on the independent scene for new young prospects to scoop up. What they saw there were three standouts: Daniel Garcia, Wheeler Yuta, and Lee Moriarty. This trio by most accounts were the best out there, known for facing each other time and time again, and AEW would promptly sign them. It was a talent war after all, and they weren't going to let the competition get not one of these guys. They would soon after be nicknamed by the AEW audience the Killers, in opposition to the Pillars. I should note here as well that many people do consider Hook to be a part of this group as that fourth member mirroring the Pillars, but I don't, so I'm not going to be talking about him here today. It's just those three were a recognized collective on the scene. Hook was an unknown. It doesn't fit right in my head. Regardless of that though, I think each of these guys' individual runs since signing with AEW have looked completely different from one another, while also being tied to each other simultaneously. For example, all three have been put into factions, but those factions were or are fundamentally different from one another. They've all had notably great matches with top names within the company, but the platforms those matches took place on were vastly different. These three, the Killers, are connected without being connected all the time. And today, I hope you notice that as we look back to what they've each done with AEW so far and what they may look to do in the future. Before we get into it though, make sure to leave a like on this video down below and subscribe to the channel, where we're always talking graps. Now, without further ado, let's start with my personal favorite of the three, Wheeler Yuta. Of a trio defined by the factions they've been a part of since joining AEW, Yuta sits atop that list in terms of just how much they've been defined by them. Probably something we should have all seen coming, given his introduction to AEW came as a recruit of the Best Friends. Subbing in for an injured Trent Beretta, Yuta came into his first match on AEW Dark Elevation and turned some heads. He was a skilled wrestler, maybe not the most physically gifted in the world, but technically sound, no doubt. At the time, he was only 25 as well, so there was still a ton of growth to be found there, which is why he soon became canonically known as Chuck and OC's son, as you can see by these tweets. He would learn under them for just a couple months before his first match with Jon Moxley took place on October 16th, 2021. He would be beaten in under a minute there, and that's even underselling it. He had his ass handed to him, belt to ass situation here. Yuta didn't get a single bit of offense off, and all OC could do while he was standing at ringside was look at him with pity almost. This at the time felt inconsequential, a means to an end, just a random TV squash. But no, this match would stick inside of the head of Wheeler Yuta. He would consider over the next couple months just where he was headed alongside the Best Friends, and if that lined up with where he wanted to be. Those thoughts would culminate on February 2nd, 2022, where Moxley faced Yuta for a second time. A solid little 7-minute affair it was, showing just how much Wheeler had grown in the distance between their first encounter. But the thing we should focus on here comes afterwards, where Mox is met in the ring by Bryan Danielson with a proposition. An idea that maybe two of the baddest men in the entire wrestling world should not just fight. They should come together. Not just to run the company, but to take some of the young guys within it and train them to make the future better. The first young guy he mentions when he brings that point to the table was Wheeler Yuta. Specifically talking about how Wheeler was coming out there with jokes like Orange Cassidy and Danhausen What if they took him under their wing instead? That idea is not just something I popped huge for at the time, especially considering both our other killers got a mention directly after, which we will get to in their parts. But it's something that only furthered Yuta's obsession with proving himself to Jon Moxley, proving himself to Bryan Danielson, proving himself to William Regal, and proving himself to himself, which again came to a head in a tag match where he teamed alongside Chuck Taylor against Moxley and Danielson. I posted a video on Twitter of the spot. I might show it on screen if I get bold, but I won't put sound on because I'm just terrible fear of getting obliterated by claims. But basically, it's Danielson delivering his signature kicks onto Yuta while screaming at the young man to show him what he's got. Yuta then responded to this with fire. He responds to this by taking on the challenge. And that's the moment that BCC knew this was their guy. Further proof of this was Regal on commentary telling Shivani that Wheeler Yuta was damn good and he was smart for not giving up, but he was simply outmatched by experience. Even with the trio of the BCC being clearly very impressed, they weren't just gonna beg Yuta to join them. He was gonna have to do it on his own, and after the match, he would make his intentions very clear, where he left the best friends on the ramp to join the BCC in the ring. He would be met with an infamous Regal slap upon arrival, but he again did the right thing by not backing down in the face of William Regal, just like Bryan Danielson and Jon Moxley did before him. Regal would then tell Yuta to keep working at it and maybe they would talk soon, and talk soon they certainly did. But 5 days before the match, you all know I'm begging, I'm crying, I'm screaming to talk about. Wheeler Yuta won his first AEW/ROH championship with the Pure title at Supercard of Honor 2022. A belt that, while not being so relevant in the broader fans' eyes, stays incredibly relevant to the Killers as a collective, as they would all each hold this title at some point within their 3-year runs. Yuta would be the first of the three to do it though, and it only furthered this idea that he was evolving. He was getting better, as did the match that happened on the March 30th, 2022 episode of Dynamite where he took on Bryan Danielson. This one is less thought about when retelling this tale by a lot of people, and I get it, the other match is great, it's easy to overlook, but this match is also pretty great. And again, furthered the story of Yuta being desperate to prove himself to this group. The best of that and the conclusion of that, however, comes with Jon Moxley versus Wheeler Yuta from the 4/6/22 episode of AEW Rampage. I have a full review of that match up on this channel, so I won't go so far in depth. I implore you to check that out. What I will say though, and I feel like it is going to be enough once you hear me say it, is that this match is definitively my favorite professional wrestling match of all time. It's simple, it's effective, it's violent, it's spirited. Wheeler Yuta defying normal human logic in order to prove himself as a young wrestler is the kind of thing I just eat the fuck up. After that match though, Yuta would officially join the Blackpool Combat Club, truly beginning a storyline arc that has defined his young career ever since it began. As a member, he would get violent, he would get mean, he would be molded into exactly the wrestler that Mox and Danielson wanted him to be, not just through the training they spoke about often where they would kayfabe basically beat the shit out of him on the daily, but through things like Best of the Super Juniors 2022, Blood and Guts, trios matches with the other BCC members, Anarchy in the Arena, Blood and Guts again in 2023, Stadium Stampede. He has done a lot of big things since then, and it's why even though I think there is definitely an argument to be made, I think he's remained the most relevant killer of them all. He's consistently been on TV in prominent positions. Hell, he was just heavily featured in the build to All In Texas, one of AEW's biggest moments ever. I mean, it's clear that AEW sees a lot in Wheeler Yuta. And while I know that's not an assessment that everyone agrees with, I've come to terms with that, it's one that I fully agree with. Yuta might not be the flashiest wrestler of them all, but he plays every single role he's given perfectly. Even during the Death Riders' lowest points, where they would come out to silence he would always get the crowd to be chanting against him by the end of a match. He just knows how to make the most of whatever minutes he's given, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for it. He's only 28 now as well. He has a long future ahead of him in professional wrestling, and while I don't think he'll ever be a guy you put the AEW World Championship on, there's certainly pathways for him to win some kind of gold within AEW, to stay relevant within these big storylines, and to provide value to AEW for many years to come. He's given me far too much evidence of his tenacity to think otherwise. Taiga-style Lee Moriarty. Probably the weirdest of the three we're going to talk about, mostly because he just doesn't have a signature thing, really. At least it's hard to point to one if you were asked randomly, but of all the things people might point to, maybe the Bryan Danielson CM Punk pair of matches would come to mind first. It's been a long time since they've happened, and I'm not going to sit here and say they were incredible or anything, but they were a good example of just how talented Lee was, even way back then. An example of the potential that he had that I still feel is wholly untapped. They've tried a couple of factions for him. If you remember way back when, there was the short-lived Firm, a retainer faction for MJF that included the likes of Big Bill, The Guns, Ethan Page, and of course Lee Moriarty, led by Stokely Hathaway with the sole goal of doing Max's bidding. That group got completely stuck in booking hell and fizzled out into nothing, which basically meant it had no impact on Lee's standing at the time. Nowadays, he resides in Shane Taylor Promotions alongside, of course, Shane Taylor, but also the Infantry and Anthony Ogogo. I'm not going to pretend like they're some super notable group or anything, but I'd say being involved with them for as long as he has been a net positive for Lee. Not only because I think he's grown a lot as a character within it, but also because it's gotten him on TV on a number of occasions, which is out of the norm for him, if we're being honest, as he spends pretty much all of his time on Honor Club, working for the promotion as the Pure Champion. There's that title again. I told you all it would be here, but Lee's is notable because he has the longest reign of the three already. In fact, he's just passed 1 full year as champion, and while I know, again, people don't think very highly of the Pure title or its rules, I think it has done a lot for Lee regardless. It doesn't mean much just to hold it, but he has had some notable matches that do mean a lot while he's held it. I'm thinking Blue Panther at Supercard of Honor 2025, Matt Mako at Action Dean 2, a reminder that there's levels to this, and of course, most notably of them all, versus Nigel McGuinness at Final Battle 2024 in the Hammerstein Ballroom. Nigel has always talked so highly of Lee. I'm pretty sure he trains with him, so it's not like it was much of a surprise that he picked him to work, but just because it didn't come as any surprise doesn't mean it isn't a huge deal, and I'd even go so far as to say it's Lee's biggest moment in AEW so far, which kind of says a lot about the run if we're keeping it real. Many times it's felt like he's just kind of spinning his wheels, that he's not progressing so much when compared to the other two, and I don't love that. But even still, Lee is a damn good worker. He is great on the mat. He's good at the technical stuff. I think he's continuing to get better as a wrestling character. There's a lot to like there. Why I'm saying this is because I see so many agendas out there about him, and I'm telling you now, don't fall for it. Lee still has a lot of career left out in front of him, God willing, and while I'm not saying it's not okay to critique him, it is, it's not fair to dismiss him. And I hope sooner rather than later, he's given a real shot to prove that, because I still firmly believe in Taiga style. Even as the youngest of the three, Daniel Garcia has been given the most out of all of them to varying results. Starting from the very top though, his introduction to the company is eerily similar to Wheeler Yuta's, whereas he was best friend's son, Danny was 2.0's son. Daddy Magic and Cool Hand Ange, as they're known now, took him under their wing to their fullest extent, accompanying him to the ring at all times and being seen in many a promo segment backstage. The trio would eventually begin feuding with Eddie Kingston, Santana, and Ortiz in early 2022, which is something to point out because Santana and Ortiz were butting heads with their Inner Circle faction leader, Chris Jericho, due to their loyalty to the Mad King, who himself was butting heads with Jericho too. That all came together on the March 9th, 2022 edition of Dynamite, where Jericho and Jake Hager would turn on Santana and Ortiz, replacing them with Daniel Garcia and 2.0 in their faction. Not long after being given the name Jericho Appreciation Society, a group that focused solely on sports entertainment. A lot of things we can go into on that front, but keeping with DG, this was a move that frustrated the AEW audience a lot, including myself. Mostly because Danny is a damn good pro wrestler. This was maybe when he was at his best. That's up for debate for sure. But he wasn't doing pro wrestling. He was instead being a character, always around and in center focus for the group's skits and their big jokes. This, of course, is in major contrast to what his counterpart Wheeler Yuta was up to at the time, being trained and forged by the Blackpool Combat Club, the pro wrestling faction. A faction that many thought Garcia should be in, especially considering Danielson dropped his name alongside Yuta's in that promo I mentioned earlier. AEW themselves wasn't shying away from this either, openly addressing it on TV, with Garcia then doubling down on the fact that he was going to be a sports entertainer in the now famous "Well Then I Am Too" promo. Of course, the JAS and the BCC, the two groups with completely different wrestling philosophies, would clash soon after in Blood and Guts, where the BCC would pick up the victory in emphatic fashion, but Garcia would meet members Jon Moxley, Wheeler Yuta, and Bryan Danielson in singles matches coming out of the affair. Moxley was a good match. Yuta is for the Dan Yuta enjoyer in your life, and yes, they do still talk about it. They do all the time, and that's right of them as a Dan Yuta enjoyer. But Danielson, that was more. The American Dragon was Garcia's hero, and this was his first match back since sustaining an injury at Blood and Guts. He was fighting a hungry Garcia who had recently started to let that pro wrestler within him come out to play more and more, and it was through that Garcia would win the match. He got a pinfall victory over the man that inspired him to be a pro wrestler. And in the rematch just a few weeks later, a 2 out of 3 falls match, no less, Garcia felt untouchable. He lost the bout, not entirely unexpected, but his performance within it was special. This was clearly a guy with the skill to rise to any occasion. This was the guy that people had touted when he was coming into the company, making it all the more devastating when he just stuck with the JAS. Jericho had prevented Garcia from shaking Dragon's hand after the 2 out of 3 falls match, and still Garcia stuck around. In the moment, it felt like the wrong call to most, and now, with 3 years behind us since then, it feels even more like the wrong call, evidenced by how stagnant the young star felt up until late 2023 with the inaugural Continental Classic. This was AEW's version of the G1, and they made it feel as big as possible, filling it to the brim with top stars within the company, and Danny was the youngest wrestler in it. The story was simple. He would lose every single one of his matches due to his inexperience, but would show immense fight every single night. The promos that were then cut backstage after each loss, where Danny and Daddy Magic would detail just how badly Garcia wanted it, just how badly Garcia needed it, were special. And it made his win versus Brody King, a man that had been built up throughout the tournament to be a destructive force, in his last group match, feel like he won the world title. It felt like now, after all this time, he was finally being given a progressive story arc, one that would shape him into a true top contender within AEW, furthered by what he would do after the C2 was over, getting involved with FTR as they would take on the House of Black. I remember this feud quite fondly as one of the best things the Trios division had done in a while, and one of my favorite Collision rivalries. And DG's role within it was centered. He was clearly the project that FTR and AEW were trying to further. Put on display even more so with the Elimination Escape the Cage feud-ending match where Danny would be the one to officially win it for his team. Danny had now been given real focus, real care for an extended period of time, and looked to be in prime position to win a championship with AEW on it, not just the pure title. This attentiveness came to a head at Revolution 2024, where Danny would challenge Christian Cage for the TNT Championship. A match that I was present in the building for, one that I thought was actually quite good, except Danny didn't get it done. Christian would retain, and something similar to what happened after the Danielson 2 out of 3 Falls match would occur with Danny again, where after feeling like a wrestler so ready for the big elevation, he was forced into stagnation once again, only truly broken once again 6 months later by a match with MJF at All Out 2024 that displayed oh so perfectly the raw talent that Danny still had within him. It shouldn't be like this. Danny shouldn't have these extended periods of just nothing, really. And look, that match with MJF, it led to a TNT title match with Jack Perry at Full Gear 2 months later, and he won the belt. That's a moment you celebrate, no doubt. Danny had won a singles title within AEW, the TNT belt no less. That was a big deal. But I think I speak for most people out there when I say it was far, far later than it ever should have been, and it felt a little underwhelming because of it. What didn't help was that afterwards, at least in my opinion, Danny's work got stagnant. I don't say that just because of 1 or 2 singles matches either. I have a whole Continental Classic 2024 run to go off of, and 7 defenses of the belt as proof as well. His offense became just less dynamic, less about what makes him great. The jackknife pin era, oh god, please, Danny, never use the jackknife pin ever again. The character work at the time was just not really there. I don't think this is all due to him individually, of course. I think AEW could have given him way more and set him up for success way better. But I have to stay honest to how I truly felt at the time, and I feel comfortable doing so even more than I normally would, given how he's looked without the title, which in my opinion is as good as he's ever looked. He's been great in the all-star tags that have defined AEW in the year 2025. His singles matches against Dax Harwood and Kyle Fletcher are 2 of my favorite TV bouts of 2025 as well. Danny feels reinvigorated right now, and although it remains to be seen what that's going to turn into, it's a reminder that Daniel Garcia is still a big part of AEW's future. He's still one of the best young talents in wrestling, despite so much fluctuation over the years that aren't even really his fault. It's easy to forget that through all of this, right now, he's only 26 years old. That's incredible for all he's managed to do. And it's why I think, just like the other 2 we've spoken about in this video already, he has a very bright future ahead of him, which is kind of the broad point I want everyone to take away from this video. The Killers, while each having their own faults individually, and definitely with their booking, are still special. They still display time and time again why they were such hype prospects coming into the company off of the indies, and why AEW should continue to develop and feature them. The early 2000s era of grapplers are wrapping things up. Their careers are coming to an end. There has to be people to follow them. And while AEW has a plethora of young talent to do so, the Killers deserve their place in that. They deserve to live out the vision that Bryan Danielson had for them, that Jon Moxley had for them way back in 2022. That right there is going to do it for the video, everybody. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, make sure to leave a like down below. While you're down there, make sure to leave a comment with your thoughts on the Killers, past, present, or future. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, where we're always talking graps. Thank you all so much for watching. Much love, stay safe, and Killers forever, man. Killers forever. Peace.